Hey, everybody, this is Brett Ingram. This is the optYOUmize podcast, the show that helps entrepreneurs build their dream business and dream life. Today, we're talking with Nathan McFarlane, founder of Creatria, cutting edge social commerce app, and a former finance guy turned social commerce entrepreneur. I'm super excited because he's a perfect example of how we can follow our passions and we can cut our own path, even if sometimes that means switching careers and going in a totally different direction. So, with that, welcome, Nathan. Thanks a lot for joining us.
Thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
Yeah, I'm excited to talk to you. I think you have a really fascinating background, and especially where you came from and where you are. So, definitely want to dig into that. But can we actually start off with your personal story? I'm curious about you started off in finance. So, how was that? How did you come to get into that kind of career? And what was your background like?
Yeah, I mean, I worked in the UK in technology, and then for whatever reason, decided to leave. And I was like, well, what am I going to do next? And I was like, oh, okay, you know what? I'm going to go into finance, and that kind of became my career. I moved to Dubai 12 years ago, and then became an investment broker, financial advisor, whatever you want to call it, whatever every name you can have for someone that's in finance, financial sales, and realized quite quickly that the entire financial system, how financial products are sold, and actually the whole system itself, it's all a load of BS, and that that it really, the way that you were taught to sell just simply wasn't in line with my morals, ethics. I understood why it's done. I learned about business, or inverted commas business, in finance, but I didn't like it. So I saw an opportunity to start creating content almost with a bit of a chip on my shoulder. That's how it kind of really started, of like, look, this is the way it is. Like, I don't like the way financial products are sold. So I'm going to start creating content about it. I'm going to educate people about the hidden charges, the way products are sold, the crazy cold calls, the ins and outs of everything to do with finance, and started going viral, which is great, really enjoyable. I was like, oh, I've gone from not what I was expecting, but it's what I wanted naturally, right? Because that's why I started doing it. I was wanting to create awareness for how someone in my sector, with the knowledge that I had, saw the way it worked, and really needed people to understand it, and obviously a platform for change. All I realized was that I was getting all these views, millions and millions of views on videos, just by being authentic in my area of expertise, and was being authentic, but I wasn't making any money. So I kind of told you the story of it when, the only way I could make money is if brands were approaching me. In this particular instance, there was a brand that approached me to be able to promote their brand. They were willing to offer me $5,000 for one post, which was at the time quite a lot of money. I chose to not do that, and less than 12 months later, that company was in the worldwide news, with a certain curly-haired fellow going to prison not so longer after that. So that was a prime example of how the entire system could have ruined my career, right? Like, I need to make money. There's a company that comes to promote me, and what wants me to promote their services. There's no reason why anyone would think from the outside that there's any issues. You've got all these massive financial backers around the world, but yet if I had promoted that company, that potentially could have ruined my career. As it was, because I'd already recognized that problem, I started creating a social platform where creators could monetize, and the idea is to build a new financial ecosystem which kind of reinvents where the flows of money are going in the system, and bringing money away from the corporations, giving it back to the people, and then finding a way to create an ecosystem which is more fair and equitable for the people. Um, at the end of the day, what my expertise gave me, and the great thing about having to create content every day is you have to spend hours and hours of learning about everything every day, right? So, you end up doing more research, more digging, more informational, looking into different pieces of content and pieces of information than you would have any other time in your life, right? If you're working in a normal finance job, you're just selling. You're not actually looking to provide actual value. Like, I want to make money. That's what the system is. But in this instance, I know I want to create value for people on the other end. If we start to learn about the system, but not just on a micro level, but on a macro level. And you're seeing that over the last 5 years. You're seeing the financial system coming to let's start to say an interesting turn, and that links into politics, and that links into where the world's going. And then you understand how the financial system actually works, and it's a big bubble of air, and that they're printing money for fun. And then suddenly you start to see, well, hang on a minute, who's going to get hurt at the end of it? The reality is, it's about then creating that awareness. But then that is what then started to make me look at the world in a completely different way, from what at the beginning of my journey is I want to earn money, to what my journey is now is I want to raise the collective consciousness of humanity. And that is an evolution of consciousness through the actions that I've taken over that period of time.
Yeah, that's fascinating. Really fascinating journey. And also, points out a couple of really key things that you said. First of all, I think it's so important that you mentioned the idea that, look, you had an opportunity for an easy paycheck. There was something about it for you that didn't sit right. It didn't connect with you morally. There was an issue with your values there. And so you stuck to your guns and did the thing that you thought was right. And I think so often that's a challenge for a lot of people, right? Because it's really tempting to just say, well, geez, I'm not making any money doing this right now. This is an easy way to get paid. But in the long run, right, I think the most important thing is, and you do see this play out sometimes, thankfully, is that you have to have whatever your moral code is, and that has to be non-negotiable. You've got to be able to stick to that and say, if it's outside the realm of this, I'm just not going to do it, because otherwise, like you said, you don't really stand for anything other than, how can I get the easiest paycheck possible? And
Yeah.
it's hard to have a message that's going to resonate with people when that's your battle cry.
And then
Where can I get paid next time?
Yeah, but that's the problem, right? And this is the problem with the financial system, right? So if you understand, I look at this, the financial system. The financial system is driven on a bunch of lies, right? It's all of it's lies. It's all lies. And if the foundation of it is lies, then naturally it's going to draw you towards the wrong choices. The reality is, for me, is I know if I want to become a bigger, better version of myself, I just need to always follow my truth. And then if you're counteracting this fact of, you live in this world of a financial system which is driven by lies, and I have this kind of like belief system that there's only two emotions and they're both linked to truth and lies. So everything from truth comes from a place of love. Now, not the love kind of like I love you, and more like a love like everything for the world, treat the world for what it is, in a positive mindset. And everything from lies comes from a place of fear. And our entire thesis of our financial system comes from a place of fear. It causes a fear mindset, a survival paradigm, and it just leaves people to take the easy route out, away from their truth. And if it's away from their truth, they are living a lie. So what's crazy to think is, because of the system that we live in, it enforces bad habits which take us away from our truth towards lies, and therefore actually lower our state of consciousness. Because until the point where you live through the basis of your truth, you get to a point, where, how do I put this? The more you align yourself with your true being, which is your true self, which is driven by truth, the more you start to understand the way the world actually works. The less you do that, you keep yourself in a state of this lower paradigm of fear a fear mindset, which is driven by how the financial system works. There's this illusion that there's not an abundance when actually there is. And all that I've found is the more I've followed my almost like intuition radar of what's right and what's wrong, and always followed what's right, it's been easy for me. And I think part of it all kind of clicked when I just really didn't. I started not caring about what others thought of me. I was like, that was the starting point. All whilst you care about way that others think, you're going to chase things for others' validation. And when I was younger, I did it all the time. I'm not trying to preach to the choir saying that I'm the Messiah, right? Because now I don't do that. I did it, but all I'm talking about is just evolution based on my choices, which potentially means your listeners can come in and go, yeah, you know what? Actually, I might be more in my intuition says, you know what? Yeah, follow that route of truth, and you might actually just open up layers of your mind for the better. But I just think the more I've done it, the more I've found myself to be closer to my actual purpose. And what most people find, whilst they're not living in their truth, they just think their purpose is to make money. Make money for what? If it's past the fact of being just to be able to support yourself and your family, if you're after the Ferrari, or you're after the yacht, or you're after whatever else, you're just searching for others' validation, which means you're lying to yourself. So, the reality is there could be an abundance for everyone, but because people lie to themselves through the existing system, they leave themselves in this place of wanting more and finding themselves further away from their actual purpose and alignment. Once you find yourself in alignment with yourself and what you do for your purpose, you start to find that everything just comes together. And I live in a state of life now where I'm like, because I don't care about those things, guess what? It just comes to me anyway now. And all those days when I was struggling away, trying to hustle to make the buck or make the first investment to get moving. And you're like, you're kind of, you feel like you're not really in alignment with yourself. It's really difficult. And guess what? Once you get in alignment with yourself, things just happen. They just flow.
It's fascinating. I mean, and I, one of the things that has always sort of amazed me about the getting and spending sort of thing you touched on is the fact that for those kinds of people, right, it feels as though there is no finish line. I mean, how many billions can you amass before there's no point to it anymore? I mean, it's literally just a contest to see who can accumulate the most. And I'm not anti-wealth. I'm not anti-wanting material things. All that stuff is fine. But when it becomes for its own sake and there is no value behind it, I don't get it. I see the movie Wall Street, and it's such a great, classic movie. And I mean, at some point, Bud Fox says to Gordon Gekko, how many yachts can you ski behind? Like how many things can you get? How many things can you accumulate before it just becomes nonsensical? And so, again, I think if you're doing it from a place where it's coming to you naturally because you're aligned with what you love to do and you're serving, then I think more power to you. If you're stepping on people to try to get ahead or to do things, or taking things away from people that don't have anything to begin with in order to ingratiate yourself, that's where I think that's where it starts to get evil. That's where it starts to get ugly.
Well, this is where there's a really interesting overlap, isn't there? So you've got, for people in some capacity, if you're chasing so much money and you're looking to keep it for yourself, there is some level of consciousness that you're missing, some level of understanding within yourself that you're missing, right? Because you're still living on these paradigms of either fear, and if you're talking about power and pride, that's still on the basis of paradigm, and not even have the courage to say, you know what, I need to understand, to look at the world in a different way. So that's already one issue. And then beyond that, let's say if we override that issue and say your point's right, you want to try and live for your purpose and do what it is, which is great, right? But then if you have reached that position where you've done so, you've then got to surely like if you there's only one way of understanding that the world needs to be more equitable in a certain way, but you've risen your position of power and essentially fuel, right? You've been like, the way I just see money is just fuel, it's petrol, right? That's all it is, it's gas. So like, why should I have 1,000 petrol stations and someone have zero, right? It's no use to me. So actually, if you've got to that position of power and understanding, you should be already trying to find a way or ways to be able to make the world more equitable through the fact that you've been given access, whether that's through through luck or for your own gain from your own things you've done in life, or whether you've inherited it or whatever. If you reach a certain level of consciousness and understanding that you're there to just provide for everyone else because you've got the ability to, because you have no material gain out of anything, and then that's within itself is what makes and motivates you, then anyone that's in a position of power that's got tens of millions, hundreds of millions, billions of dollars should already be creating systems which change the existing financial system. Otherwise, they're clearly not conscious to it and they're still holding for their own gain, right? So I mean, when you really extrapolate it, and you've got to extrapolate every layer of it, if they're not doing something to change the status quo for the betterment of humanity, even though you might look at these people as, wow, they're most amazing, they're the richest people in the world, they're so super smart, they're building rockets, right? Great. But there's clearly something missing in their level of consciousness of understanding what really matters in this world, and what matters in our physical selves, and actually understanding who we truly are as beings itself. They've been caught, that they're so caught up in this physical world because of the system that we've created, we've actually forgotten what we actually are. And once you start to understand that and you reach those new levels of understanding, you start to realize, well, hang on, what is all this that's been created? Like, what is the only thing that matters? And this always links back. I always look at it this way. Have you got kids?
I do. 3.
Okay, perfect. So what do you want for your 3 kids as a father?
I want them to be passionate about what they do. I want them to be true to who they are, and I want them to be the best versions of themselves. I mean that's
Okay,
the
that's
happiness
exactly
that
the line
comes
I
from
was
that.
looking for. Be the best versions of themselves. Now, being the best version of themselves is raising their consciousness to higher levels of what we are speaking about right now. And so therefore, as humans, as this state of consciousness in 2025, where we are right now, all our goal is to put the breadcrumbs in place to ensure the next generation elevate the consciousness to another level. So if we're not putting those breadcrumbs in, we're not fulfilling our purpose as father. I'm not even a father yet. Like one day when I do have kids, right? But that's the way I always link it to it. It's like, I'm going to want my kid to be bigger and better than me. But what is bigger and better defined as? Because in the last 20, 30, 40 years of my life, I'm 40 this year, I reckon it's probably been defined bigger and better as, they make more money than me.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
That is the biggest load of bollocks ever. Like, think about it. It's such bullshit. It really is. And that's what we've been taught in this society. Then, okay, if it's not that and we accept that, then what is it? Okay, being better versions of themselves. Okay, now define better versions of themselves. Okay, well, they've got to have firstly, they've got to have courage to be truthful, like you said. Okay, so that's the standard layer of consciousness in an upper paradigm. And then, okay, from that courage, they understand the way the world works to a point of where actually they look at every single person on the planet just the same as they do. The problem is we've been created in society today. It's not just the financial system. It's the actual system that we live in as families as well.
Yeah.
Because in theory, because you spend time with your 3 kids, they have a value higher to you than 3 other kids out there, right?
Mm-hmm.
But if our consciousness was that high, they wouldn't have any other value because they're all equally the same, right? We've been although the family unit has had this fantastic effect on society to secure society, and I am one for holding on to the family unit, not one for this woke separation society, definitively, which I feel can, we can go into feminism if you want, but I mean, let's try not to, and how that's ruined society. But I mean, we've got to get to a point with our own levels of consciousness to understand that our children and any other child or any other human out there are just all equally the same. We're all one another. We're all part of each other, right? We're all part of the same flesh and blood, same. And if you do believe that there's something inside us that directly comes from the divine, which I do, I'm not going to use the word God, I use divine, because God's a term that's thrown about too many and linked to religions, and I'm not really for that. I'm linked to that there is something above us. I believe there's something inside us that comes directly from source, and therefore in each and every one of us there's something that comes from source. Therefore, one of us is a tree branch, one of us is a leaf, one of us is a trunk. We're all the same, part of the same thing, right? But all whilst we lose ourselves away from that, and we don't elevate ourselves to understand that we are all one, we're always separating ourselves. And that's what the existing systems do. Now, it just happens for me in my role, it was finance, and it started on a very granular level. But the more I extrapolated the granular level, I started on a macro level. When I saw on a macro level that it suppressed consciousness, that was like my neural pathway opening to understanding where the way the world worked. Now, other people's, yours is going to be a different entry point. There'll be something that resonates with the things that you learn throughout life that links into your entry point of understanding consciousness. But the reality is our role in the world today, if we're fulfilling our purpose, should be to elevate consciousness to a level so that our next generations of people out there live in those higher states of consciousness, not in states of control from whether that be governmental control, financial control, because the moment then that those systems are designed to suppress it. So this all then links into the new financial system, an open source element, perhaps, where we, the people, decide what happens. And if we elevate our consciousness to that level, people won't put up with the BS because we understand it already. Don't give me that level of stupidity. And what you understand is when you start to open yourself up to these layers of truth, all that I've found is I always used to think, right, I'm just a guy from a small town in the southern England. I mean, I wasn't fed with the golden spoon. You can probably tell by my accent, right? I understood, and I saw what I call the bullshit radar. You can smell it, right? But all that happens is the more you get closer to your truth, the more you raise your levels of consciousness, the more your intuition spots things before you even see it. So all that happens is, without knowing it, your mind is 5 steps ahead of people that aren't hiring their states of consciousness because you're not in the flow state of what's required. Now, just imagine if 50,000, 100,000, a million, 10 million, 100 million people start to raise their collective consciousness and their levels of intuition, the domino effect that would have on existing power structures and systems that suppress the collective consciousness of humanity. I mean, to me, that just blows my mind. So therefore, to me, that's my purpose now. It's like, okay, I've got to find a way to make a system more equitable and a way to be able to reach out to people and understand in the world and putting the breadcrumbs in place to be able to give us a better world for our future. Because if someone doesn't rise up against it, then those breadcrumbs aren't going to be left to other people. It could be a breadcrumb for you. I might say one sentence today, and it just goes, "Oh, that really resonated with me." Right? For someone else, it might be something else. But for me, outside of that, like, what is there? I mean, look, we've just created this consumer-driven society to make us think that we want things. What do I want? I live in a tiny suitcase out of hotels, traveling the world, seeing the world, doing what I want. I mean, what do I need? Why do I need a house? Oh, because the bank needs to sell a product. That's why I need a house. Or why do I need a car? Because the bank needs to sell me the car. So all you're seeing is existing power structures, which essentially is the financial system, create the way society perceives we should be. Oh, what? You're 40 years old and you don't own a house and you don't do all this? Yeah, no, but some guy 120 years ago that set up the Federal Reserve set up those practicalities of the social environments for what we're living right now. Why the fuck should I listen to that guy? He was already dead and buried 60 years ago.
Well, and to your point, you mentioned the fact that this permeates all areas of society, and we're sort of conditioned this way young. Well, I can equate that to even youth sports. My two sons were both soccer players, or you might call them footballers,
Yeah,
and
football. It's definitely not soccer. I don't know what
yeah,
that is.
it's okay. It's okay. My older son, you'll appreciate this. My older son is finishing his last year at university in Scotland, so he's now a footballer. He's no longer a soccer player. He played football there, and he's like, Dad, it's football and American football. He's like, it's not. He's like, there's no soccer. I'm like, okay, sorry, but to that point, even in the youth system, the fascinating dynamic for me that I sort of stepped back and saw, and it's in a, I guess, less consequential environment than the entire financial system, if we're talking about youth sports. But the fact of the matter is, this is what I saw. They bring kids into teams. You try out for all these teams. There's a hierarchy there. So you've got these teams where you're putting, which in some ways makes sense, because if you put kids that are very good with kids that aren't, it's very difficult. The good kids get frustrated and then the lower kids feel intimidated because they. So I understand it on some level, but here's the problem: the coaches all say the same thing. What we want to do is play this team game where we're moving the ball up the pitch and we're working together to score goals. And then what they do is they reward the individual who ignores the rest of the team, puts their head down, dribbles through a few guys, and because all of a sudden they're able to do it, now they're the one who's looked up to as that's the standard. Well, the problem is, if you extrapolate that out and you put 11 guys on a field that all do that, guess how many games you're going to win? Zero. It's a team sport where you need to win games. But if everybody's playing one-on-one and that's what's always being rewarded, it's the opposite of what the coaches claim they're looking for. We're looking for
Yeah.
team players. We want vision. We want passing. You get into it, and the kids that elevate, the kids that get picked for academy teams, the kids that move up through the ranks are the ones who are selfish, who only
Mm-hmm.
care about their own game, want to score all the goals, don't care about and every coach must have the same. This is what I sort of inferred from all this. Every coach must therefore think their ego is so big that they believe if you give me a bunch of kids that play this way and I put them on a team, I'll be the one who can get them to play as a team. I've yet to see it happen. I've been around
Right.
soccer for 15 years, like youth at every level, rec soccer all the way up through academy soccer. And I've yet to see the coach that was able to reward superstars for selfish behavior and play, and yet build a team that works. The few coaches I've seen that have done it have run a system where their mantra is, I don't have any superstars. I got a team of players. You play within the team ethic. The rules apply to everybody. You show up late, you don't play. I don't care if you're the best kid on the team. If you show up late, you don't have the uniform, so I'm going to borrow the uniform from a kid who's not as good and let you wear it to play. You've just destroyed the entire team ethic there. And that's just one example, but I see parallels between what you're talking about and the fact that the way that it's structured, it's already set up as a zero-sum game where there are winners and losers, and it's not about the rising the tide to make everybody better and make the team win. It's about aggrandizement of the individual and the performance.
Yes. So what you're talking about there is, yeah, what you're talking about is not collectively growing together and picking out certain winners that glorify a certain person's ego in this instance. Well, that could be a certain person's ego or a very, very wealthy individual's ego who runs a financial system or the system itself, which plays to that further layer. You've created actually a very like grassroots version of separation, and and that links to the separation of consciousness. So the guys that are there picking the big players, they've obviously got some level of ego inside themselves where they're thinking for themselves. You can't blame the kids on that. Now,
No,
it's on us as adults to be able to educate them to say, look, it is a team game, so on and so forth, and that's our job. This is where I start to think is because of the financial system we've created, we have this illusion that we are a far superior human race right now because we've created all these things. Now, we may have, out of this existing system, created a lot of things, right? A lot of things, and a lot of technology may have come from that, which can bring a lot of good. But the reality is, as a collective consciousness, the existing system has suppressed us in a fear state, a state driven by ego, an environment driven by desire, not all the good things that potentially we could look at to be able to elevate our levels of consciousness. And I think that's been lost through this consumer driven system. I don't think we actually understand what we've actually lost. The only way that I can describe it now, and like, it sounds strange, I get goosebumps that come through the back of my head, through my arms, through my body. It's called, like, and I've had to Google, use it, like I've had to chat GPT it, deep seek it, and not understand it. And it all happens when I'm speaking directly from my truth, or I'm listening to a certain type of music, or I'm in a certain environment, and it resonates with me, understanding that there's something here to be seen. And I kind of think of it as a superpower, right? Sounds strange, but I kind of think of it as a superpower. And all it makes me think is, why do I get that? Why does that happen to me? And I've come to the conclusion it's because I've got to a point of understanding about certain things, and my emotional triggers, there's something inside me that recognizes those emotional triggers. And I've grown up in an environment up until, I would say, the last sort of 3 years, where this has started to happen to me. I start to think, what superpowers did we actually have? What has actually been suppressed in us that we can't even imagine? So we already recognize we don't get anything out of a consumer driven society. Yes, there might be technological advances, but there will be technological advances in a different society, in a different way. Perhaps we would look for natural healing methods rather than pharmaceutical companies to solve our issues when we're unhealthy. Perhaps we'd look for real food rather than big food for what we should be eating. There's lots of different ways we could look at it, but all that I see is, the longer that we have this existing system, the worse it is for humanity, because we are losing touch with what we truly are. And I think we're at this kind of crossroads where I think large social media is largely driven by, look, how long ago, when would we on the other side of the world be able to have a conversation like this and it go out to, I don't know, 1,000, even 1,000 people, let's just say 1,000 people, 1,000 people's eyes. When would we have been able to do that in the however many last 100, 50, 20, 10, even 5 years ago, right?
Yeah.
So all that is doing is dropping those breadcrumbs for everyone else to have that kind of, hang on a minute, yeah, that guy's got a point there. And then that it gives them perhaps the impetus to kind of follow suit on the way that they want to embrace that understanding of who they are and what they truly are, if they were to elevate their levels of consciousness. I just think we're at this kind of crossroads where we're seeing a movement in where the world power is going. Now, that doesn't mean I think the United States, it's the end of the United States. I don't think that. Do I think the United States has had its rodeo and it's time for maybe someone else to put some chips in the middle? Yes, I do. I think that I think that's been known for quite a while, but perhaps it's just about become conscious to the average guy in the street since COVID, I would say. And I think it's going to leave us in a place where there's going to be decisions made in a not so distant future. And we have this perception that it's world leaders that make these decisions. It's not world leaders that makes these decisions. It's the collective that makes the decisions, that forces the leaders to go down a certain path. We saw the things that were rejected after 2020 in certain, let's call, verticals of where the world may have been going. We may have been own nothing and being happy, but I mean, perhaps that doesn't look so obvious now because there's certain parts of the world that are rejecting that. But it doesn't mean that those agendas aren't still going to be played out, because you're just seeing the existing power structure that's centralized a lot of power and going to want to hold on to it as we're moving into this new system. If we ignore it, which is basically a lowered state of consciousness, we're worried about how we're going to pay the bills, right? When we shouldn't worry about how we're going to pay the bills, right? That we live in a world where realistically, if you're living in the Western world, you're worried about paying the bills, you've got some issues. Not because you've not got the money, because you're going to be all right. Your ego is worried about how others are going to perceive you, or how you can't watch TV this weekend, which the reality is it doesn't mean anything. But because we're so blinded by the illusion, that leaves us open to be able being manipulated more, and being manipulated more means that we'll end up having our children will end up being enslaved even further than what we are. This illusion that we're free in the land of the free, or whatever. We're not free. That's again, that's BS. You're in a system that's designed to suppress your consciousness. That is being, because of social media, because of us, people like us talking and at least dropping the breadcrumbs. We've got the ability to awaken a lot more people than whilst they're looking the other way, watching The Simpsons or whatever. We actually go, hang on a minute, there's far more important things in actual Springfield, not in Springfield in The Simpsons or whatever you're watching, right? So, I mean, that's the way we kind of got to look at it. And I think this is why social media is so important, but it's got to be structured in such a way where we're already thinking about what the next system is going to be, and that's part and parcel of what we're doing with my company.
Yeah, which I think is fantastic, and I agree with you 100%. I mean, look, the power is definitely with the people. They have to recognize they've got the power, because
Yeah.
when people band together and when people go for a common cause, you can see what can be accomplished. You can see the kind of change people can make. So with social commerce, you obviously see this as sort of the future of things, and the app that you created, Creatria, is ties into that. So
Yeah.
can you give us a sense of what that's all about, what its purpose is, how we can use it?
Okay, so you got to firstly look at where the attention is, and the attention is on social media, and you still got to understand that people use and spend. So you've got to combine the attention with understanding where the money flow goes, and you've got to somehow transform the money flow away from the American corporations, because the American corporations control the consumer based internet outside of China. And if the American corporations continue to and that's not just American corporations, the American corporations are at the forefront of it, right? The reality is, for the rest of the world, that's not good, because it means if all the money's going to these corporations and it's stagnant in these corporations, it means it's not going back to the people, which means there's no economic growth in these other countries, which could be growing in these instances. So you're looking to build a system. This is not to say that the American corporations are suddenly going to go broke. It just means actually it's about time some of the money went back to the people. This is for even your average American, right? This isn't just about every nationality around the world. This is, the money should be going back to the people. The money should circulate between the people, not a dead entity. What's a corporation mean? Where does the word come from? Corpse, dead entity. So we give money to dead entities whilst the living struggle to pay the bills. That doesn't make any sense to me. So, and I understand the structures and how it got to where it is. That makes sense. I get it. But someone's got to stand up and say, well, hang on a minute, we've gone a bit too far here now, haven't we? How can we restructure it in a way which actually is going to be more beneficial for our economy? Because actually, the corporations having all the money is not good for the economy. Like, that's the reality. It's not. So, okay, how can we reinvent that where everyone is happy? And that's kind of what we're looking to do, and kind of bringing things together. And we're starting in Southeast Asia because of kind of a peer-to-peer community to kind of grow, and then we'll go from there. I don't personally have a positive outlook out from where I'm from, the UK, Europe. I think the US is, if the US makes right decisions, the right decision is a direction where it can still establish its economic power, but yet ensure that it's putting its people first, not whoever else it puts first. You don't even know who they are. I think that the US can still be in a great position, and I think that you'll see a world where everyone's got a foot at the table, not just one power, and that's realistically been the problem. I actually think we'll grow if multiple powers have a say in the game. But I think Europe is completely and utterly screwed because I think it's just been the little brother of the United States for so long, and the moment the United States doesn't align with Europe, Europe is absolutely screwed. And the existing bureaucracy will drive, and the lack of consciousness in the society, just thinking that everything is there and easy for free, will drive people to just follow like sheep and find themselves in exactly in that you'll own nothing and be happy society. So I think it's important for Europeans to see that. But I do think the future is more worldwide, but perhaps not in just the globalized structure that we previously had. I think you're going to find more nationalistic approaches rising. Now, the argument is nationalistic means, oh, you're just thinking about yourselves. And that can be really framed in a bad way, considering we've just been talking about collective consciousness, right? But then you say, well, EU is framed in a way, oh, all the collective countries are together. No, they're not. They're more separated than 20 countries in Southeast Asia. But they're completely more separated. But the illusion is there to be able for bureaucratic gain. So I think we're going to see nationalistic approaches come into place where you'll see countries say, no, we're going to look after ourselves because by doing so, it's actually going to be for the betterment of the people, at least in our country. And that we might have to take almost 2 steps back to take 3 steps forward, I think, because the system has just gone too far and the existing power structures are trying to hold on to it in ways which are, let's say, at best, questionably moral.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. It's like living in the Matrix, you know. If you just keep people sort of anesthetized, right? So they're
We are.
constantly busy and preoccupied. Then if you're always chasing a rabbit, then you don't have time to think about anything else. And so yeah,
Exactly.
I
Easiest way. Go to any city in the world, any city in the Western world. Stand and watch people walk through the subway at 8:30 in the morning or 5:30 in the evening before and after work, and you'll just see
Oh,
nothing else.
oh, I mean, I could speak to that personal experience. I worked in New York for a
Okay.
couple of years, and I would train in, and a lot of people, you sort of fall asleep on the train because it stops at Grand Central, so you can't miss your stop because it's going to stop, and then you get out, and it's early morning and everything else. And I always told everybody, if anybody came to visit me, when you get off the train, before you step off the train, make sure you've woken up and you're alert. Because in Grand Central, the people whiz by you, you will get knocked down. It's not
Yeah.
malicious, but no one's paying attention, and they're
It's
all flying 100
unconscious.
miles an hour, going to where they need to go. And it is to stand back and watch that is fascinating. And I'll tell you a funny aside to that.
Scary.
So
It's
what's it? Yeah,
scary.
yeah,
It's
it is
scary because it
scary.
just shows how many people are unconscious of actually their lives. They're like, oh, I've got to do this, so now I've just got to switch off and do this, and I'm going to spend 8 hours of my day, a third of my life, which is basically half of your life. You spend a third of it sleeping, a third of my life just unconscious to anything, just
Yeah.
because I've got to pay the bills, which we already established in the grand scheme of things. If you're in the Western world and you're not driven by consumer behavior, you can get a job which will provide for you and you can still live in the conscious state of being.
Well, I'll tell you what's crazy. So, I was working for a company that was headquartered in Silicon Valley, and one of the guys that worked with us was born and raised in New York. He had never been out west, so he came out with us one time when we went to visit the corporate office, and it's a Monday morning, and we get in the car and we're driving to the office, and he goes, we're driving through San Francisco, and he goes, where are all these people going? I'm like, they're going to work. He goes, they're going. He couldn't believe it. He was laughing. They were walking so slow. They were taking their time. They were chill. And he go, having been born and raised in New York, it was foreign to him. He didn't get it. I'm
Yeah.
like, I'm like, the pace is just different. I'm like, the people out here just have a lot like chiller vibe. I'm like, it's super intense. Like you get to the Northeast of the United States, it's super intense. You go down south, you go out west, it's definitely chiller. And, look, there are people in the Northeast that will frown on that and say, whoa, but the reality of it is you got to slow down sometimes. You can't always go 100 miles an hour. And so I always found that story fascinating. But
I think when you're going 100 miles an hour, from my experience as well, because I worked in financial services. I was an investment broker, commission only job, kind of like 21st century Wolf of Wall Street.
yeah,
And you just have to become that animal in that zone. And I think if you just become your job, and and you're just focusing for money, you completely lose who you actually are. You have to sit in the quiet in yourself, in actually inside yourself, outside of the system, to start realizing, oh, maybe I'm not actually that person. I mean, we could do an entirely different conversation on your actual avatar. Am I Nathan McFarlane, or was that just something that was created because I was born in the UK and I've had the path that I am? Or am I actually something else? Well, what is that? And if I look inside myself, I might actually find it. But actually, because I live in this society in this way, I am Nathan McFarlane, and it means I'm like this. But if we spend our time in this outward society, in this blinkers on, well, how are we going to ever expect to actually realize who we actually are? Because we're never going to spend time within ourselves.
yeah. Well, we'll definitely have to connect again and go through some other cool stuff. But for right now, anyway, I got one last question I got to ask you because
Sure,
I
mate.
I always ask it, and I'm curious to know what everyone's going to say, especially what you're going to say. And that's, what's your number one tip for success as a business owner or an entrepreneur?
There is no such thing as success. Like what? I mean, like everyone asks me this question. I mean, like the definition of success in our society is like making money. I mean, I just have a goal, right? And I suppose my goal, my purpose, and I believe that is my success. And I'm on a mission to raise the collective consciousness of humanity. So if I can drop breadcrumbs along the way, which are going to awaken others to understand who they truly are and actually what really matters, then maybe you can define that as success. Because what is success? You could say, what's his name? The guy from the Wolf of Wall Street we just mentioned, he was successful, but there's also a nurse that just saved someone's life. Is she more successful? I mean, our definition of success and the word success as an entrepreneur, businessman, whatever, is completely screwed and skewed. You could do a thousand podcasts about that, because that in itself just shows how terrible our society is structured. But for
I knew
me,
I'd get a great I knew I'd get a great answer. That's why I had to ask you the question. There was no way you were coming out with something straight as an answer on that one. I knew you were going to
I
pick
don't
it
come up
apart.
with their straight answers. They're all subjective, aren't they? So I mean, it's subjective, but I mean, for me, it's just about dropping the breadcrumbs for the future generations, and kind of just sit back and see what plays out. I suppose. I don't think I'm ever going to sit back, but I mean, you know what I mean.
I do. That's awesome. Thanks a lot, Nathan. I appreciate you sharing all your insights and great tips with us. Visit creatria.app. That's CREATRIA.app to see the future of social commerce. Thanks for tuning in, everybody. And as always, remember, no matter what you want for your business and your life, don't compromise, optimize.